Welcome, Coach, to the third and final component, character. This section will cover how to build character in your athletes by building a values-based team. The benefits will create a better practice and game environment for your athletes and improve their performance. We will also discuss how to take the skills learned and translate them to life skills. Jeff Dukes of the Three Dimension Institute refers to these as not first-dimensional specific skills, where each sport training is unique to that sport, but rather second and third dimensional qualities which are universal. That means they apply to not only the sport itself, but outside of sport and in life. Many times character is an afterthought, but is just as vital as any other coaching skill. In fact, in the new USOC framework, character is one of the key components of quality coaching and listed as an athlete-targeted outcome, not just performance. In this module, we'll discuss the type of character traits we want to develop in our players and how to turn core values into core behaviors. We also will share an activity that you can use to work with your teams to identify key core values you would like your players to develop during the season. Remember, a coach's influence is never neutral. You have the ability to impact lives beyond the playing field. Okay, Coach, let's get started. First, as John Wooden said, be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. Start by being the real you at all times so players can model the way that they want to be, who you are, and not by what they think you are. Another way to look at this can be explained in a lesson done by Tim Elmore from Habitudes, who uses the example of the iceberg. In his analogy, he states that it was what was below the surface that sunk the Titanic, not what they saw on the surface. Our image is at the top of the iceberg, or what we see. Our reputation and character are those qualities that are below the surface, or what we cannot see, but that define our character. There's a handout that can help you use this exercise with your team to explain and discuss this concept. The biggest thing about teaching character is that it is at the very foundation of coaching itself. Mark Bennett states that performance is not about outcome, our outward image. Rather, performance is about our behavior, that which is driven from within. We have become so absorbed with the outcome that we are missing the boat on instilling great characters in our athletes that will last long after their accomplishments are gone. Remember, after all, that is at the heart of transformational coaching. So where do we start? How can we make sure we're developing character in our programs? Developing character should be part of every practice plan, but to do so, you must first identify what is most important to your team. If it matters and everyone feels strongly about it, then it should be a team value. These values become the non-negotiables of your team that all of you will adhere to no matter what. The problem is the values are just words on a page until two things happen. Number one, the team must own them and value them, and number two, you as the coach must breathe life into these values daily. Once you do these two things on a daily basis, they become habits. And you'll see a transition in how your team performs and behaves differently in games, practices, and everyday activities. This has been done with teams at all levels. Some recent notable teams you may have heard about lately that use this practice are the All Blacks rugby team from Australia, the University of Clemson football team, and several high schools here in our state. There are handouts that you can use that reference these programs. You've also been given something that will help you do this exercise with your teams. The question is, I know the importance of all this, but where do I get started and what types of resources are available? You have an activity that will be listed and is available on the website. Let's start with the activity that helped guide you through this process. John O'Sullivan from Changing the Game Project gives us a great roadmap to follow for a session on developing your team values. This shows one for a shorter session of 30 minutes, and there's also a longer 2-hour session to go even deeper. Both of these diagrams are available and are in your workbooks. This team value session is for any coach with any level team. It is an activity that I have seen work every time it has been used. It can be used year to year and revised and fine-tuned as needed by each program, or it can become a staple part of the foundation for your program. It's important to take the time to work through this with your team. So coach, grab a clipboard, a piece of paper, and get started with your activities and your athletes, and I'm telling you, it will be well worth your while. Make sure the entire team develops, agrees, and signs an agreement and posts it in a visible spot. Trust us, this is one of the most impactful things you can do for your players if you stay dedicated to its importance and the daily use of it, even if you do it for just 5 to 10 minutes a day. Tell me, coach, what drill can yield you that type of result? This exercise and continual reinforcement is guaranteed to yield transformational results for your players and team. Here are just a few. To build more focus and accountability. To instill great habits and character development. And yes, it will help your team play better, coach, even if at times we still are transactional. Every coach who has done this has told us what a difference it has made in their team and how it has energized them as coaches and given them a new life, a new way to go about working and relating with their players. What more could you ask for, coach? Another suggested activity is to hold a preseason team retreat and include these activities such as some team building exercises. Develop your team values and use the 2-hour developing team value exercise and conclude with developing a team theme or motto for the year that incorporates the values that you came up with. Let's talk about ways to teach the values once the season begins. You could pick a value each week that you will discuss every day. Or pick 5 different values for the season and dedicate a day of the week, as explained above. The important thing, coach, is that every day and every week you make sure you go back to the foundations of your program, which are the values you developed. You got that, coach? Now, I guess you may be wondering, that sounds great. But with everything else I have to do, getting ready for practice, getting my X's and O's in line, getting my players ready, getting my assistants ready, where am I going to get materials to cover these value lessons that you talk about in these sessions? Over the past 10 years, we have accumulated a wealth of information from some of the most influential transformational coaches that I know. This has been through readings, attending workshops, and personal mentoring and conversations. And we would now like to make this available to you, coach, so that you can help us build the transformational coaching culture. All of this information will be made available to you on our coachesofimpact.com website. Please feel free to use this material just as others have shared it with us. The more you talk about these values, the more they will become real. Your players will look forward to hearing the stories and lessons that you have to share, and you will be surprised how many of them will talk about the lessons and concepts among themselves and remind each other for many years to come. I have personally witnessed this, and there is no better feeling when a player comes up to tell you about a lesson he remembered from a few years ago. And coach, it just takes a couple of minutes a day. We will have available for you over 50 team lessons, 30 short video clips to use with your players for discussion, over 40 recommended books, 15 websites, more than 30 handouts, and inspirational literature for you and your teams to use. Teaching character will be made easy for you with all of these available resources. Remember, coach, teaching character needs to be intentional. It is not an event. It is a process. Continue to bring them up daily and reward good examples over and over again. Allow players to acknowledge and applaud each other through put-ups when they see these values exhibited. Now they are reinforcing the values among themselves, and they are owning them. And finally, think about doing something different at the end of the year. Instead of all the different MVPs that we've seen over the years evolve, how about some special awards to those who have exhibited the certain values that you've set as team goals? You cannot over-communicate your team values. Again, I repeat, you cannot over-communicate your team values. They are the all-time thing, or they are nothing. In closing this section, it's important that coaches, you know how to intentionally develop character in your athletes. Let them define who they are and who they want to be. Write it down. Get them to be committed to them in writing. Make them public and review them often. And hold them and yourself accountable, whether you do the 2-hour or 30-minute version. But when you do, you will transform your athletes into people with life skills, and not just players, but players with sports skills as well. This is what true transformational coaching is all about. We hope you have enjoyed this session.